Teddy, do you think this is a fight over free speech, or is it something else?
Well, I think it's largely a fight over power. What I mean by that is, everybody understands this is not exactly a matter of free speech in the sense that nobody's being thrown into prison for anything that they tweet. The important thing I think to keep in mind is Twitter and all the social platforms are driven by algorithms that determine the likelihood of you seeing this or that post when you log in. And the question of who writes those algorithms, is really consequential. So it's not a matter so much of, free speech. Most people have the right to tweet whatever it is they want. It's a question of, which tweets and posts get algorithmic promotion and wind up in the feeds of millions of people and which ones don't. And I think the view of Musk, and obviously this is sort of validated by the fact that Donald Trump got kicked off Twitter, that sort of supports his point, is that these algorithms are written in a way that, sort of effectively censor conservatives. Even those who aren't literally kicked off the platform feel that they are sort of shadow banned or that there's a thumb on the scale preventing their virality. And so I think that the question how these things are written, do we have transparency into the way these things are written, and ultimately, which tweets, go viral and which ones don't is hugely consequential. And I think that's what this is really about.
There's also the question of whether a free speech town square can really exist on the internet or anywhere. Renee DiResta of the Stanford Internet Observatory wrote in The Atlantic, the public square metaphor places wholly unrealistic expectations on what social media is or should be. It may simply be that when networks grow past a certain size, they become unmanageable. I mean, do you think Twitter has ever really been a public town square?
Well, no, because of this reason of algorithms. In a public town square, you can shout whatever it is you want to shout, and the people around you are going to hear it. On Twitter, the whole mechanic of the platform, the whole idea of it is your tweet can go out to millions of people who didn't make the choice of following you, just because it starts taking off, and then the algorithm boosts it into feeds all around the world. So it's really sort of fundamentally unlike a town square where you're sort of your reach is sort of limited by the volume of your voice. That's obviously not the case on Twitter. I do agree that these platforms have all become sort of ungovernable. If you just look at the empirical reality, both Democrats and Republicans are livid at Twitter. The Republicans are livid that Trump and some of his allies got booted. The Democrats think that Twitter is the reason Trump and some of his allies moved from the fringe to the political mainstream in the first place. The same debate obviously happens, arguably even more caustically over Facebook. So, I think that these platforms play a huge role in the discourse of the country. Twitter, especially to a weird degree, because even though it's smaller than Facebook by numbers, it has a disproportionate share of journalists spending all day there. And so things sort of make their way from Twitter into the nightly news and the local news and the daily papers all around the country. And it is obviously the case that these questions are fundamentally political. And, the way that these platforms have navigated these questions has obviously alienated both sides.
And yet Twitter is, at its base, a private company. Our own Matt Winkler has been talking about how when it comes to driving pure revenue growth, Elon Musk has no equal. He points out that revenue has grown 260 times in the last decade. Sales in the last year up 71%. The workforce has tripled 5 times since 2016. I mean, what politician wouldn't dream of that much job creation? Does that matter?
Well, look, I think there's a whole bunch of questions here that are kind of all intersecting in this sort of strange question of, is Elon Musk actually going to buy Twitter and is he going to get away with it? There's the economic question. It may or may not be good for Twitter and Twitter shareholders if he takes it over. There's the sort of moral and cultural question of speech. And there's the political question of, which party this helps, which party this hurts, and, and how this winds up playing out for the parties. By the way, not just in the US, but all around the world, the core dynamics that we see here, these companies happen to be based in America, and that's why a lot of the conversation is happening in America. But these same dynamics are happening all over the world, where you've got resurgent right-wing parties that have become popular on Twitter and so forth. So I think there's a lot of questions here. There's also a thunderstorm breaking out behind me. But I think obviously the ultimate yes/no of does this happen is going to be played out on Wall Street and by the SEC. The political consequences are going to be downstream of that.
So So the question is, should, if as you say, Twitter is ungovernable or maybe ungovernable, then what should happen? It's a private company. Is Elon Musk the answer? And if not Elon Musk, is it a public utility? Is it something else?
I personally think it's probably not Elon Musk. There's been a lot of people, mainly Elon Musk, sort of allies and supporters over the past couple of days saying, hey, look at, for instance, Bloomberg, look at the Washington Post. The Washington Post was bought by Jeff Bezos. There's a really critical difference between the Bloomberg Washington Post model and what Elon Musk is proposing. Bloomberg and Bezos don't march into the editorial boardrooms at Bloomberg Media and at the Washington Post and demand a change in coverage. They pledged not to. Musk is sort of doing the opposite. He has essentially pledged to alter the way that information is shared and disseminated on Twitter. So there is a question of media consolidation. He's obviously not the first billionaire to get into the media ownership game, but he's the first, at least in this sort of cohort, to do so with an express agenda behind that. And that agenda is not the sustainment of media or public information. It's got a political bent to it. So whether Twitter and these other platforms ought to be regulated as public utilities or not, I think to me it's concerning that one individual, by the way, it could be I'm a Democrat, it could be a Democrat. One individual could take over one of these companies with an express purpose of changing the way that the terms of service and the algorithm works, which again is ultimately about who controls the discourse and are these sort of fringe positions able to be disseminated and mainstream to millions and millions of people, and what that does to our politics. So he's obviously got an agenda, and in that sense, I think his agenda is, it might be aligned with the economic incentives of the board and of the shareholders, but it's probably not aligned with the public good.